We're so glad to be here talking about this important topic on this stage and the employer opportunity in addressing relationship abuse. This can be a difficult topic for some of us, so please do whatever is needed to take care of yourself and your own peace as we do that. Before I introduce our panelists, I did want to share a little bit of background on the Allstate Foundation and our mission. Since 1952, our inception, we've been focused on empowering people and communities so they can thrive. And we do that now through two core focus areas: empowering young people ages 5 to 25 to serve and improve their communities, and disrupting the cycle and reducing the prevalence of relationship abuse. We strive to do all of this through a lens of trust-based philanthropy, really centering the needs of the nonprofits and those closest to the communities they serve as the experts in the space. When we talk about relationship abuse, the Allstate Foundation has been involved in this issue for over 21 years, investing more than $110 million. Yet it still remains a prevalent issue, with 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men affected by this issue in their lifetime. That's 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men. That means with those numbers, they are your employees, they are your colleagues, they are your customers. And that is why it's so important that we're here to address the role of employers in reducing the prevalence of relationship abuse. So joining me today, we have Sonya Passi, CEO and founder of FreeFrom. We have Sharisse Kimbro, Relationship Abuse Program Officer at the Allstate Foundation, and Katie Ray Jones, the CEO of the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Sonya, I'm going to start with you. The organization you lead, FreeFrom, is engaged in multiple studies of survivors and the economic impact of abuse, and most recently, survivors in the workplace. So can you tell us how workplaces can play a meaningful role in survivors' empowerment and thriving, and why this is important?
Yeah, absolutely. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Fantastic. So, excuse me. The number one obstacle to safety for survivors is economic insecurity. People cannot afford to be safe. And this is for 2 reasons. The first is 99% of survivors experience economic abuse, which can look like not being, having a paycheck taken from you, having credit cards in your name that you don't know about, having to hand over your paycheck. And then on top of that, the CDC estimates that intimate partner violence will cost a female survivor over $104,000. So it is incredibly expensive and incredibly economically devastating to experience, to be subjected to intimate partner violence. What survivors need is stable, secure money. And the problem is, we know that 60% of survivors lose their job because of the harm. And we also know that survivors are using an average of 11 sick days and 12 vacation days a year to deal with being subjected to harm. And that is assuming that they have those days in the first place. So there is a huge role for employers to play here in ensuring that survivors can keep their job, be safe in their job, and have the flexibility they need in order to navigate their way to safety. Because what we know at this point, as survivors ourselves, but as an organization that has surveyed over 15,000 survivors at this point, survivors know exactly how to support themselves. What they need is conditions in which they can do that. And employers have a huge opportunity to support their employees who are subjected to harm, and also to take responsibility for what is a societal problem, not an individual problem.
Thank you. Sharisse, Sonya touched on what economic abuse is, but for those who might not know and fully understand it, can you delve a little deeper for us?
Absolutely. As Sonya mentioned, economic abuse is very prevalent. It's the most prevalent form of domestic violence, but the least recognized. 99% of all survivors who experience domestic violence will experience economic abuse. And economic abuse is when one partner tries to control the other partner's ability to earn, acquire, accumulate, or access economic resources. And Sonya mentioned a couple examples. Job interference, that can mean harassing the person at job, preventing someone from getting a job, or making conditions such that a person loses their job. It can include stealing money from the other person, excessively monitoring spending. It can include pinning someone on an allowance without that person's knowledge or agreement. It can include running up debt in someone's name that they don't know, or forcing someone to incur debt. And so the net result of all of this is what Sonya mentioned, is an inability to access the financial resources that you need to be safe. So if you think about the fact that nearly every single survivor experiences domestic violence, and like as Kate mentioned, every employer employs a domestic violence survivor, the employer imperative is very clear: to create a supportive environment where survivors can thrive and be safe.
Thank you. Katie, the hotline is literally at the front line for survivors dealing with relationship abuse, including economic abuse. So can you share a little bit more about the cost of domestic violence?
Did Simon say?
Yes, Simon says. I'm still worn out from that. So.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure people can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That wasn't a Verizon plug. I have to use levity because this work is really intense. A survivor myself, and $3.6 trillion is the economic cost. That's from the CDC as well. That encompasses medical costs, lost work, as Sonya mentioned, the criminal justice system. Such a huge impact. 9 in 10 employees surveyed would tell you they know domestic violence is impacting their employer's bottom line, but not many employers are doing anything or being active to engage their employees that this could be a safe place for you to tell your story, to get support. We know with 1 million people reach out to the hotline every year for services, and over 8 million people visit our websites. Highly prevalent, and yet many don't, they're telling a stranger at the hotline the most intimate details of their life, not knowing that they can go to their employer to get that support. What we hear on the lines often is that going to work is often the safest place for them. That might be where they can access a computer to look up resources. It might be where they get their peace of mind. It might be their opportunity to talk to an employer, to secretly divert money to a different bank account. There's lots of places an employer can have the space to really empower a victim and survivor to create hope for a life that is free of violence. Sonya shared some of the statistics related to lost work. 32,000 full-time equivalent jobs are lost each year due to domestic violence. And what I would just say, and I know Sonya will cover a little bit more of this here in a few minutes, is when someone leaves the relationship, it often gets more difficult. And oftentimes when employers work with us, work with FreeFrom, they will think like, if I can just get that person out of the relationship, super. But often their needs from their employer in terms of leaving work become greater when they're trying to exit the relationship, and they need their employer looped in more than ever.
Thank you for that. Sonya, based on what Katie just said and how employers can support throughout the entire process, and your personal experience as an employer, what are some policies or practices that every workplace, regardless of size, should have to adequately support survivors?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. Every workplace is different in size, in the work that you do. Are you doing crisis work? Are you not doing crisis work? Some of us think we're doing crisis work, but we're not doing crisis work. One of the big policies that we are pushing for nationwide is paid and protected leave for survivors. So I talked earlier about survivors using 11 sick days, 12 vacation days a year. You're not sick and you're not on vacation. And what you're doing is you're bearing the brunt of a societal problem. As employers, we are pillars of our society. We get great benefits as employers. We also have to give back as employers and take responsibility. And so as an employer to bear the cost in saying we offer X number of days if you need to deal with being subjected to harm, really is not a cost that we feel. It is a cost that a survivor feels if they have to choose between getting safe or keeping their job. And so we have been able to work with many companies, employers. The city of Chicago now has this, Meta, Bumble, Berkshire Bank, the Caring Foundation, or the Caring Group, Blue Shield of California, and implemented this policy that survivor employees can use. And one of the big things that people say is, well, what if someone doesn't feel comfortable disclosing? And what our data shows is, one, when the policy is there will be people that don't feel comfortable, but when the policy is there, the company is signaling to its employees, we take this seriously. This is not yours to bear alone. And we also encourage people not to ask questions. And I can tell you, I have staff that have used this policy, and it is the hardest thing in the world because you care so much about your people. Someone writes you and says, I need to take this leave, and you just say, okay. No questions asked. I'm here if you need me, no questions asked. But there's so many other things that employers can do. An advance on a paycheck can be huge. A cash stipend, like an emergency cash stipend for unforeseen events. We worked with an employer, one of their employees was sexually assaulted in her home. And for her own well-being, she could not stay in that home. And the employer helped her with first last security deposit because she just didn't have it up front, but she needed it in a time crunch. So what I encourage people to do is to think about just how can you be open to listening to your employees about what could be possible here. What support could they have within the context of your work environment? And this looks different for everyone, but as everyone has said, we're all employing survivors. So just as you have kind of like community groups within your workplace that you're ensuring have their needs met, this is another group within a group that needs to have their needs met. And it's as simple as just asking, what can we do? And being curious.
Yeah, Katie, building on that and talking about employees disclosing abuse, some employers might not know how to handle that or what to do. So what are some best practices? Sonya touched on it a bit, when someone does disclose that and potentially is asking for help.
Believe survivors. People do not make this up. Yes, believe survivors. We carry so much shame and guilt. I just want to double click on Sonya's remark about don't ask questions, because we're already getting asked a lot of questions and we're already being judged so much outside of work. Believe a survivor when they're coming to you. It takes a lot of courage for us to disclose even the smallest detail of what's happening. Listen, try to be non-judgmental, and you do not have to be a subject matter expert. We exist to support you in that space. Our second highest contact type at the National Domestic Violence Hotline is friends, family, coworkers, people who typically sense something's going on. How many times have we heard tragedy strike and a coworker sensed something was happening with them? They noticed a change but didn't know what to say. Again, these are the safe spaces. The most busiest time for us at the hotline is typically a Monday morning, people returning to work. They've been at home with their partner over the weekend, and they're finding a safe space to connect and get information and resources. Experts like us, we can handle the safety planning, but I want you as an employer to understand these are individuals, when they begin to feel like they're losing control, the abusive person is losing control, they may try to sabotage their employment. They may show up at your workplace. They may try to prevent them from going to work. These are signals that something might be happening with one of your employees, and them knowing they can come to you is a really great first start.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to reinforce that we don't expect that employers are going to be experts on this or have all the answers. It's just knowing where to direct people for help is really such an important step, like the hotline FreeFrom as well. So, Sharisse, we've talked about this, that these types of policies and best practices don't just help survivors. They really help all employees when you have a certain degree of flexibility, and whether it's splitting paychecks or things like that. So if an employer is just beginning this journey, what's the very first step they should take?
Yeah, I think the first thing that an employer should know is that, or the first thing they should do is really start where you are. Look at the existing policies and practices that you have in place that you might not think may benefit survivors, and to Sonya's point, inquire if it would be helpful for survivors. If you have a system in place where you give employees a check for disasters, think about, do domestic violence survivors know that they can be included in this? Can we inform them that they're included in this? The paycheck flexibility is another big, huge thing, either splitting your paycheck among accounts or even changing the ways that you receive funds, because sometimes survivors want to receive funds in a different way than direct deposit. So the abusive partner doesn't have knowledge of that. So some of those things are things that might be easy levers for you to pull that might not be a big cost to you. The other thing I would say is to know you're not alone in this. As Kate mentioned, there's nonprofit partners that are willing to help with training or information, resources. And also at the Allstate Foundation, we have launched a collaborative of employers called the Survivor Empowerment Network. And I think Kate's going to talk a little bit more about that later. But it's a place you can come to get resources, webinars. We have office hours that are becoming online. So really be with other employers who are also committed to creating a workplace that is supportive for survivors, because we know that there is a will and an interest in doing it, and you might not know how, and you don't have to do it by yourself.
Absolutely, and we do have hopefully we can put the slide up, we have a QR code where you can actually click on and join the Survivor Empowerment Network. And as Sharisse said, it's just a collective, a community with shared best practices, learnings, a community that you can, just connect with and feel a sense of you're not in this alone. We have lots of great resources, again, from our experts, including Katie and Sonya. And we know this information might be new and some of it might be overwhelming. So it's just important if you can check out these resources, maybe share them with someone else and see what's available just to understand the issue a bit further. So if someone does approach you, you at least know where to direct them for support. So again, we really just want to emphasize we're all in this together. Employers have a meaningful and important role in addressing this issue, and without employers, we really can't effectively do it because that economic empowerment is so important. Survivors are strong and resilient, and they deserve systems of support that come through collective leadership like all of us in this room. I just want to thank all of our panelists today. We even wore our matching outfits accordingly by our seats, so we're really excited about that. But just thank you all so much for taking the time for this important conversation. And again, I hope you walk away with one thing you can take back to your employer and think about doing differently. Thank you all so much.